The Saturday morning sun was bright as Kaisha Williams pulled her old Honda into the parking lot of Precision Point Shooting Range. She sat in her car for a moment, looking at the fancy building in front of her. The place looked expensive with its brick walls and big glass windows. She could see people inside moving around with their guns and gear. Kaisha took a deep breath and grabbed her rifle case from the back seat. The case was black and worn from years of use. It had traveled with her to many different countries during her time in the Army. Now she was back home in Georgia, trying to figure out what normal life was supposed to feel like. She walked through the front door and heard the sound of guns firing from the indoor ranges. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Behind the counter stood a young man with a friendly smile. His name tag said, "Jake." "Good morning, welcome to Precision Point," Jake said. "First time here?" "Yes," Kaisha replied quietly. "I need a lane." "For the day, something at the far end if you have it." Jake looked at her rifle case. "That looks like serious equipment. What are you shooting today?" Just some practice," she said, not wanting to explain too much. She filled out the paperwork and paid for lane 15, which was at the far end of the range, just like she wanted. The range was busy for a Saturday morning. Men in expensive hunting clothes stood around talking about their latest deer hunting trips. Some wore military-style clothing, even though Kaisha could tell most of them had never served. They had all the newest gear but handled their weapons like weekend hobbyists. Kaisha walked down to lane 15 and set her case on the bench. She opened it carefully and pulled out her rifle. It was a custom-built precision rifle that had been with her through 3 deployments. The weapon was not flashy or decorated. It was built for one purpose only: to hit targets at very long distances. She began setting up her equipment with the same routine she had followed thousands of times before. Every movement was smooth and practiced. She checked the rifle, adjusted the bipod legs, and began mounting her scope. The scope was worth more than most people's cars, but it looked like any other scope to people who did not know what they were looking at at the other end of the range. A group of older men were talking loudly about their shooting skills. The loudest one was a tall man with gray hair and a big belly. He wore a shirt that said, "U.S. Army Retired," and talked like he wanted everyone to hear him. "I tell you, boys," the man said, "back in my day, we knew how to shoot. These young people today think they can learn everything from video games and YouTube." His friends laughed and agreed. The man's name was Richard Morrison, and he had retired as a general after 30 years in the Army. He spent most of his time now telling stories about his service and complaining about how things used to be better. "General." Morrison noticed Kaisha at the far end of the range. He watched her handling her rifle and shook his head. "Look at that," he said to his friends. "Another Instagram shooter with expensive gear she probably doesn't know how to use." His friends looked over at Kaisha. She was a young black woman, maybe in her late 20s, wearing simple jeans and a plain t-shirt. To them, she looked like someone who was trying to look cool with a fancy rifle. "Probably saw it in a movie," one of Morrison's friends said. "These people think shooting is easy." Morrison watched Kaisha adjust her scope with careful movements. "Someone should go help her before she hurts herself," he said. "That looks like a real rifle, not some toy." Kaisha could hear some of their conversation, but she tried to ignore it. She had heard comments like this before. During her early days in the Army, some people had looked at her the same way. They saw a young black woman and assumed she did not belong. She had learned to let her actions speak louder than their words. She continued setting up her equipment. She attached her shooting mat to the bench and arranged her ammunition. Each bullet had been carefully selected and tested. She knew exactly how each round would perform at different distances and weather conditions. Morrison kept watching her. "Look how she holds that rifle," he said. "All wrong. Someone taught her bad habits." What Morrison did not know was that Kaisha held the rifle exactly the way she had been trained by the best military instructors in the world. Her grip, her stance, and her breathing were all perfect. She had spent years learning not just how to shoot, but how to become invisible, how to wait for hours without moving, and how to make impossible shots when lives depended on it. Kaisha loaded her first magazine and looked down the range at the targets. The closest targets were at 50 yards, then 100 yards, and the longest ones were at 300 yards. For most shooters, 300 yards was a challenging distance. For Kaisha, it was just a warm-up. She settled into her shooting position and looked through her scope. The crosshairs were perfectly aligned, and she could see every detail of the target. Her breathing became slow and steady. Her heart rate dropped. This was the calm feeling she remembered from her deployments, when everything else disappeared except her, the rifle, and the target. Morrison was still talking to his friends, but now he was watching Kaisha more closely. "She's going to embarrass herself," he said. "I almost feel bad for her." One of his friends suggested they should offer to help. "Maybe we should go over there and give her some tips," he said. Morrison nodded. "Good idea. We can't let her struggle like that." "It's the right thing to do." Kaisha fired her first shot. The sound echoed through the range, and several people looked in her direction. Through her scope, she could see the bullet hole appeared exactly where she had aimed on the target at 100 yards. She fired 4 more shots, each one carefully placed. When she was finished, she put the rifle down and activated the target return system. The paper target came back to her, and she examined it closely. All 5 shots had hit within a 2-inch circle at the center of the target. For most shooters, this would be considered excellent shooting. For Kaisha, it was just her normal warm-up. Group. Morrison saw her examining the target, but he could not see the results from where he stood. "Probably missed the whole target," he said to his friends. "I think it's time we went over there and offered some friendly advice." Kaisha hung up a fresh target and sent it back out to 200 yards this time. She was getting comfortable with the range and her equipment. The rifle felt good in her hands, like an old friend she had not seen in a while. She did not notice Morrison and his friends walking toward her lane. She was focused on her shooting, just like she had been trained to do. Nothing else mattered. When she was behind the scope, not the noise around her, not the people watching, and certainly not the assumptions people made about her, the stage was set for a meeting that would surprise everyone involved. General Morrison walked down to lane 15 with his 2 friends following behind him. He had a big smile on his face, the kind of smile that showed he thought he was being helpful. His boots made loud sounds on the concrete floor as he approached Kaisha's shooting position. "Excuse me, miss," Morrison said in a loud voice. "I hope you don't mind me coming over here." Kaisha looked up from her rifle. She had been checking her scope settings and preparing for her next shots. "Is there a problem?" she asked politely. "No problem at all," Morrison said. "I just noticed you over here with that fancy rifle, and I thought maybe you could use some friendly advice." He pointed to his army shirt. "I'm General Richard Morrison, retired Army, 30 years of service. I've been shooting longer than you've been alive, I'd guess." His friends stood behind him, nodding and smiling. One of them was looking at Kaisha's rifle with curiosity. The other was staring at her target, trying to see how well she had been shooting. "That's a nice-looking rifle you have there," Morrison continued. "Looks expensive. Custom job, right? Must have cost you quite a bit." "I hope. Whoever sold it to you explained how to use it properly." Kaisha set down her rifle and turned to face Morrison. "Thank you for your concern, General." "I appreciate it, but I think I'm okay." Morrison laughed and looked back at his friends. "She thinks she's okay," he said. "That's what they all think until they try to hit something smaller than a barn door." One of Morrison's friends, a man named Dave, stepped forward. "The general here has won more shooting competitions than I can count," Dave said. "He's forgotten more about shooting than most people ever learn," Morrison nodded proudly. "That's right. I've got medals and trophies at home that prove it. Been hunting since I was 8 years old. Been in combat situations where lives depended on making the shot." He looked at Kaisha's rifle again. "Now, I don't want to be rude, but that rifle there is a serious piece of equipment. It's not like the little guns they use in those shooting classes for beginners." Kaisha remained calm. "I understand, General. I've had some experience with rifles before, some experience." Morrison laughed again. "Honey, shooting a rifle like That takes years of practice. You can't just watch some videos online and think you know what you're doing. He pointed to her shooting position. For instance, the way you have your bipod set up there is all wrong. And your scope, I bet it's not even properly zeroed. Other people at the range were starting to notice the conversation. Some of them walked closer to hear what was happening. A few looked uncomfortable with Morrison's tone, but nobody said anything. Morrison's third friend, a man named Carl, joined the conversation. "The general's right," Carl said. "We see this all the time. People buy expensive equipment thinking it will make them better shooters. But there's no substitute for real training and experience." "Exactly," Morrison said. "And let me tell you something else. That rifle you have there, that's a sniper rifle. That's military equipment. It's designed for trained professionals, not for recreational shooters." He shook his head. "I worry about people getting in over their heads with equipment like that." Kaisha listened patiently. She had heard similar comments many times before, especially during her early years in the military. "I understand your concern, General, but I think I can handle it." Morrison's expression changed from friendly condescension to mild irritation. "Look, miss, I'm trying to help you here. I've been shooting since before you were born. I've trained soldiers how to shoot. I know what I'm talking about." He walked closer to her rifle and pointed at different parts. "See this scope here? This costs more than most people make in a month. And this rifle, custom barrel, precision trigger, match-grade ammunition. This is serious equipment that requires serious training. I served in Afghanistan and Iraq," Morrison continued. "I've made shots under pressure that would make your head spin. I've taught marksman courses to some of the best shooters in the Army." He straightened up and looked directly at Kaisha. "So, when I see someone with equipment like this, I feel responsible to make sure they know what they're doing." By now, about 10 other people had gathered around to listen. Some were curious about the expensive rifle, and others wanted to hear what the general had to say. The rangemaster, Jake, was watching from behind the counter but had not come over yet. Morrison noticed the crowd and seemed to enjoy having an audience. "Now, I don't want to embarrass anyone," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "But I think there might be a better rifle for someone just starting out. Something smaller, maybe a .22 caliber. Something more manageable." One person in the crowd whispered to another, "That does look like an expensive rifle for a beginner." Morrison heard the whisper and nodded. "Exactly. It's like giving a Ferrari to someone who just got their driver's license." He looked back at Kaisha. "Have you ever fired a rifle before today?" "Yes, I have," Kaisha answered simply. "What kind of rifle?" Morrison asked. "A hunting rifle? Something at a shooting class?" "Different kinds?" Kaisha said, not wanting to get into details. Morrison smiled like he had made his point. "Different kinds, I see. Well, let me tell you, there's a big difference between shooting different kinds of rifles and being able to handle a precision instrument like this one." He pointed down the range at the targets. "See those targets at 300 yards? I bet you've never tried to hit anything that far away. Most people can't even see the target clearly at that distance, let alone hit it." Dave spoke up again. "The general can hit those targets all day long." "Been doing it for years," Morrison nodded. "That's right. And I can teach you how to do it too, but it takes time and proper instruction. You can't just figure it out on your own." Carl added, "We've seen too many people get frustrated and give up because they tried to start with equipment that was too advanced for them." Morrison walked around to the other side of Kaisha's rifle. "For instance, do you know how to properly adjust the parallax on this scope? Do you know how to compensate for wind drift at long distances? What about bullet drop calculations?" Kaisha remained quiet, letting him talk. "I didn't think so," Morrison said, taking her silence as confirmation that she did not know. "These are advanced concepts that take years to master. And that's just the technical stuff. The real skill comes from experience, from making thousands of shots in all kinds of conditions." The crowd was getting larger now. Some people were taking pictures with their phones. Others were recording videos. Morrison seemed to enjoy the attention. Tell you what, Morrison said, his voice getting louder. How about I show you how this rifle should really be used? I'll take a few shots and demonstrate proper technique. Then maybe you can try some shots at closer targets, something more reasonable for your skill level. He looked around at the crowd. What do you all think? Should we give this young lady a proper demonstration of how to handle equipment like this? Several people in the crowd nodded and agreed. Someone called out, "That sounds like a good idea, General." Morrison turned back to Kaisha with a confident smile. So what do you say? Ready to see how a real marksman handles a rifle like this? Kaisha looked at General Morrison for a long moment. She could see the confidence in his eyes and hear the certainty in his voice. The crowd around them had grown to about 15 people, all waiting to see what would happen next. Some had their phones out, ready to record whatever was about to unfold. Actually, General, Kaisha said quietly, I think I would like to try shooting first, if that's okay with you. Morrison's eyebrows went up in surprise. He had not expected her to resist his offer to demonstrate. Are you sure about that? This rifle has quite a kick to it. It's not like the smaller guns you might be used to. I'm sure, Kaisha said. But maybe we could make it more interesting. Would you like to have a friendly competition? The crowd murmured with excitement. Someone said, "Oh, this should be good." Morrison looked at his friends, then back at Kaisha. He was clearly surprised by her suggestion, but his pride would not let him back down. A competition? Well, I suppose that could be educational for you. What did you have in mind? Kaisha checked her rifle one more time, making sure everything was properly set. We could start at 100 yards and work our way out to longer distances, 5 shots each at each distance. See who can shoot more accurately. Morrison laughed and looked at the crowd. Did you hear that? She wants to have a shooting competition. He turned back to Kaisha. Young lady, I appreciate your confidence, but I've been doing this for 30 years. Are you sure you want to embarrass yourself in front of all these people? I'm willing to try, Kaisha said simply. Dave stepped forward. General, maybe you should start her off with something easier. 100 yards might be too much for someone with her experience level. Morrison waved his hand dismissively. No, if she wants to learn the hard way, that's fine with me. Sometimes the best education comes from failure, he looked at Kaisha. But I don't want you to feel bad when this doesn't go the way you're hoping. Carl suggested they make the competition more structured. How about this? You both shoot 5 rounds at 100 yards, then if you want to continue, we move to 200 yards, then 300 yards, and so on. Best accuracy wins each round. The crowd agreed this sounded fair. Jake, the range master, finally walked over to see what all the commotion was about. When he heard about the competition, he offered to act as an official judge and help set up targets. This is highly unusual, Jake said, but I suppose it's okay as long as everyone follows safety rules. He looked at both shooters. Are you both sure you want to do this? Morrison puffed out his chest. Absolutely. This will be a good learning experience. Kaisha nodded. I'm ready. Jake set up fresh targets at 100 yards for both shooters. The crowd moved back to give them room and get a better view. Several people were now recording with their phones, and word was spreading throughout the range about the unusual competition taking place. Ladies first, Morrison said with exaggerated politeness. Actually, Kaisha said, why don't you go first, General? I'd like to see your technique, Morrison smiled broadly. Fair enough. Watch and learn. He borrowed a rifle from one of his friends. A nice hunting rifle with a good scope. Morrison took his time setting up, making sure everyone could see his professional approach. He adjusted his shooting position several times, checked his scope, and made a show of studying the wind conditions. You see, Morrison said loudly enough for the crowd to hear, shooting accurately requires attention to many details. Wind direction, temperature, humidity, even the time of day can affect your shots. He settled into his final shooting position and took aim. The range fell quiet except for the sound of shooting from other lanes far away. Morrison controlled his breathing and squeezed the trigger slowly. The first shot rang out, and Morrison smiled. That felt good, he said. He fired 4 more shots in steady succession, taking his time between each one to ensure accuracy. When he finished, Jake activated the target return system. Morrison's target came back showing 5 bullet holes clustered in the center area of the target. It was good shooting, with all 5 shots within about a 4-inch circle around the bullseye. The crowd applauded, and Morrison stood up with obvious satisfaction. "Not bad for an old soldier," he said. "All 5 shots in the center. Ring, that's the kind of accuracy that comes from years of experience and proper training." His friends congratulated him, and several people in the crowd commented on how impressive the shooting was. Morrison looked at his target with pride. 30 years of practice, he said. "That's what it takes to shoot like that consistently." He turned to Kaisha. "Your turn. Don't feel bad if you can't match that. Very few people can shoot that well on their first try with a rifle like yours." Kaisha nodded politely. "Thank you for the demonstration, General. That was very good shooting." She settled into her shooting position behind her rifle. Her movements were smooth and practiced, though she tried not to make them look too professional. She did not want to reveal too much about her background just yet. Through her scope, she could see the target clearly at 100 yards. The distance seemed almost insultingly close after years of making shots at 10 times that distance. She adjusted her position slightly and controlled her breathing. The first shot surprised everyone with how quickly it came. There was no long preparation, no obvious aiming time. Kaisha simply settled in and fired. The second shot followed within a few seconds, then the third, fourth, and fifth. "That was fast," someone in the crowd said. Morrison frowned. "Too fast. You can't shoot accurately when you rush like that. Accuracy requires patience and careful aim." Jake activated the target return for Kaisha's lane. When the target came back, the crowd fell silent. All 5 bullet holes were clustered in a tight group in the exact center of the bullseye. The group was noticeably smaller than Morrison's, with all 5 shots fitting within about a 2-inch circle. Someone in the crowd whistled in appreciation. "That's some good shooting." Morrison stared at the target, clearly surprised. "Well," he said after a moment, "that's not bad for a beginner. You got lucky with a good group there." But his voice had lost some of its confidence. He looked at Kaisha's target again, comparing it to his own. Her group was definitely tighter, and all 5 shots were closer to the center of the bullseye. "Beginner's luck," Dave said, trying to support his friend. "It happens sometimes. First-time shooters can get good results when they don't know enough to be nervous." Morrison nodded, but he was studying Kaisha more carefully now. Something about the way she had shot, the speed, the confidence, the casual way she had handled the rifle did not match what he expected from an inexperienced shooter. "Well," Morrison said, 100 yards is pretty close. The real test of marksmanship comes at longer distances. How about we try 200 yards? Kaisha looked at him calmly. "If you'd like to continue, that's fine with me." The crowd was getting excited now. Word had spread through the range, and more people were coming over to watch. Someone had even called a friend to come see the unusual competition. Jake set up fresh targets at 200 yards. "This is getting interesting," he said quietly. To himself, Morrison was trying to maintain his confidence, but doubt was creeping into his mind. Kaisha's shooting had been too good to dismiss as pure luck. But he could not bring himself to believe that this young woman could actually outshoot him. 200 yards, Morrison announced to the crowd. "This is where we separate the real shooters from the lucky ones." Morrison took longer to set up for the 200-yard shots. He was feeling less confident now, and he wanted to make sure he did everything perfectly. He adjusted his scope, checked his rifle position 3 times, and studied the wind flags hanging around the range. 200 yards is where shooting gets serious, he announced to the crowd. At this distance, small mistakes become big misses. This is where experience really matters. He settled into his shooting position and took careful aim. His first shot took almost a full minute as he made sure everything was perfect. The second shot came a bit faster, but he still took his time with each one. When Morrison finished his 5 shots, he felt good about his performance. "That felt solid," he said. "Let's see how we did." Jake brought back Morrison's target. The general's shots were still grouped in the center, but the group was larger now. At 200 yards, his 5 shots spread out over about a 6-inch circle. It was still good shooting for most people, but not as tight as his 100-yard group. Not bad, Morrison said, though he sounded less confident than before. 200 yards is a whole different game. The wind starts to affect your shots more, and it's harder to see the target clearly. His friends nodded and agreed that it was good shooting. But some people in the crowd were looking at Morrison's target with less impression than before. They were starting to realize that Kaisha's first group had been unusually good. Kaisha took her position behind her rifle. She looked through her scope at the 200-yard target and made a small adjustment. To her, 200 yards still felt like shooting at point-blank range, but she tried not to show how easy it was for her. She fired her 5 shots with the same steady rhythm as before. Each shot came about 3 seconds after the previous one, with no wasted time but no rushing either. Her breathing was controlled, her position was solid, and her trigger pull was perfect every time. When Jake brought back her target, the crowd gasped. All 5 shots had hit within a 2-inch circle, and they were perfectly centered on the bullseye. The group was actually tighter than her 100-yard group, which should have been impossible for a normal shooter. "That's incredible," someone in the crowd said. "How did she shoot better at 200 yards than at 100? Morrison stared at the target in disbelief. His own shooting had gotten worse at the longer distance, which was normal, but Kaisha's shooting had actually improved. That was not something that happened by accident. "That's unusual," Morrison said slowly. "Most shooters find it harder to be accurate at longer distances, not easier." Dave looked confused. "Maybe there's something wrong with the targets?" Carl examined both targets carefully. "No, the targets are fine. She really did shoot that well." Morrison was starting to realize that he might have made a serious mistake in his assumptions about Kaisha. Her shooting was not just good luck or beginner's luck. It was the kind of precision that came from extensive training and experience. "How about we try 300 yards? Kaisha asked quietly. The crowd murmured with excitement. 300 yards was considered long-range shooting for most people. It required serious skill and good equipment. Morrison hesitated. His confidence was shaken, but his pride would not let him back down. 300 yards it is, he said. "But that's getting into expert territory. Don't feel bad if you can't hit the target at all." Jake set up targets at 300 yards, which was the longest distance available at this range. "This is as far as we can go," he said. 300 yards is our maximum distance." By now, word about the competition had spread throughout the shooting range. Nearly 30 people had gathered to watch, including several people who had driven over from other ranges after hearing about it on social media. Some were experienced shooters who wanted to see the unusual contest for themselves. Morrison took even longer to prepare for the 300-yard shots. He was clearly nervous now, and he kept adjusting his scope and checking his position. The pressure from the crowd was affecting him, and his usual confidence was gone. His first shot at 300 yards missed the center ring entirely, hitting low and to the left. Morrison frowned and made scope adjustments. His second shot was better but still not centered. By his 5th shot, he had managed to get 3 shots in the center area, but 2 were scattered around the edges of the target. When Jake brought back Morrison's target, it showed a very loose group spread over about 10 inches. 2 shots were completely outside the center scoring area. It was still respectable shooting for the distance, but nowhere near the precision he had shown at shorter ranges. Morrison tried to hide his disappointment. 300 yards is tough, he said to the crowd. "The wind really starts to push your bullets around at this distance. It takes years of practice to shoot consistently at ranges like this." The crowd was polite but less impressed than they had been earlier. They could see that Morrison's shooting had gotten worse as the distances increased, which was normal but not particularly impressive. Now it was Kaisha's turn, and everyone was watching carefully. If she could shoot well at 300 yards, it would prove that her earlier performance was not just luck. Kaisha settled behind her rifle and looked through her scope. 300 yards was still an easy shot for her, But she decided it was time to show a little more of her real ability. She wanted to make a point without revealing everything. Instead of just shooting a tight group in the center like before, Kaisha did something that made the crowd gasp. She placed her first shot in the exact center of the bullseye. Then she placed her second shot about 2 inches to the right of center. Her third shot went 2 inches to the left. Her fourth shot went 2 inches high, and her fifth shot went 2 inches low. When Jake brought back her target, it showed 5 bullet holes arranged in a perfect cross pattern around the center of the bullseye. Each shot was exactly the same distance from center, and they formed a precise geometric shape. The crowd fell completely silent. What Kaisha had done was not just accurate shooting. It was artistic shooting that demonstrated complete control over where each bullet went. She had not just hit the target, she had painted a picture on it. "That's impossible," Morrison whispered. "Nobody shoots patterns like that on purpose. Not at 300 yards." But several people in the crowd were now recording with their phones, and someone who knew about precision shooting spoke up. "Actually, that's a demonstration pattern," the person said. "Military snipers sometimes do that to show they have complete control over their shots. It's much harder than just shooting a tight group." Morrison's face had gone pale. He was starting to understand that he was not competing against a beginner or even an experienced civilian shooter. He was competing against someone with skills far beyond his own. Dave and Carl were staring at Kaisha's target in amazement. "How did you do that?" Dave asked. Keisha remained calm. "Practice," she said simply. Morrison found his voice. "What kind of practice? Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Kaisha looked at him for a moment before answering. "I had some good instructors," she said. The crowd was buzzing with excitement and confusion. Someone in the back called out, "Who is she? Nobody shoots like that without serious training." Morrison was trying to process what he had just witnessed. His assumptions about Kaisha had been completely wrong. She was not a beginner with expensive equipment. She was not someone trying to look cool with a fancy rifle. She was a shooter with skills that exceeded anything he had ever seen in person. "I think," Morrison said slowly, "I may have made some incorrect assumptions about your experience level." Kaisha nodded politely. "It happens, General. People sometimes judge others by their appearance rather than their abilities." The crowd was still talking excitedly about the perfect cross pattern on Kaisha's target. Several people were asking each other if they had ever seen shooting like that before. The answer was always no. Morrison looked at his own target, then at Kaisha's artistic pattern, then back at Kaisha herself. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Before Kaisha could answer Morrison's question, a young man in the crowd was staring at his phone screen with wide eyes. He had been recording the competition and decided to do a quick internet search about precision shooting patterns. "Wait, minute," the young man said loudly. "I think I know who she is." Everyone turned to look at him. He held up his phone, showing a news article with a photo. "Is this you?" he asked Kaisha. The crowd pressed closer to see the phone screen. The article headline read, "Female Sniper Sets New Record," and showed a photo of Kaisha in military uniform. Receiving a medal, Morrison grabbed the phone and read the article quickly. His face went from confusion to shock to embarrassment in a matter of seconds. "Sergeant Major Kaisha Williams," he read aloud. "Longest confirmed kill in recent military history. Over 300 confirmed enemy kills across 3 combat deployments." The crowd erupted in surprised chatter. Someone else pulled up another article on their phone. "Look at this one," they said. "It says she's called Ghost because enemy forces could never find her position, even after she had eliminated multiple targets." Morrison continued reading from the first article. "Says here she holds the record for the longest confirmed sniper kill at over 1,500 meters. That's almost a mile." He looked up at Kaisha with a mixture of awe and humiliation. "Is this really you?" Kaisha nodded quietly. "Yes, that's me." More people were now searching for information on their phones. Articles and videos about Kaisha's military service began appearing on multiple screens. The crowd learned that she had been one of the most decorated snipers in modern Army history. 300 confirmed kills. Dave read from another article. Multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. Expert marksman instructor, advanced sniper school graduate. He looked at Kaisha with new respect. Ma'am, I had no idea. Carl found a video interview with Kaisha from a military news program. Look at this, he said, turning up the volume. In the video, Kaisha was demonstrating shooting techniques and explaining how she had eliminated enemy targets from impossible distances. Morrison set down the phone and stared at Kaisha. His face was red with embarrassment. Sergeant Major Williams, he said formally, I owe you an apology, a very big apology. The crowd had grown quiet, realizing they were in the presence of a genuine military hero. Several people who had been filming put away their phones out of respect. I made assumptions about you based on your appearance, Morrison continued. I thought I was helping a beginner, but instead I was insulting one of the most skilled marksmen our military has ever produced. He shook his head. I feel like a complete fool. Kaisha's expression remained calm and professional. General, you don't need to apologize. You were trying to be helpful in your own way. I understand that. No, Morrison said firmly. What I did was wrong. I saw a young black woman with an expensive rifle, and I assumed she didn't know what she was doing. I let my prejudices cloud my judgment, and I disrespected a fellow soldier who has served our country with distinction. He turned to address the crowd. Let this be a lesson to all of us. We should never judge people by their appearance or make assumptions about their abilities. This woman has done things in combat that most of us could never dream of doing. One person in the crowd, an older veteran, stepped forward. Sergeant Major, thank you for your service, he said. I served in Iraq too, and I heard stories about the ghost. I never thought I'd meet you in person. Other veterans in the crowd began identifying themselves and paying their respects. It turned out that several of them had heard stories about Kaisha's legendary shooting skills during their own deployments. Morrison looked at Kaisha's target again. The one with the perfect cross pattern at 300 yards. That demonstration you did, he said. That was you showing mercy, wasn't it? You could have made me look even worse if you wanted to. Kaisha smiled slightly. General, I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I was just trying to show that skill comes in many different forms. Sometimes the person you least expect might surprise you. 1,500 meters, Morrison said, still trying to process the information. That's almost 10 times further than we shot today. And you made that shot in combat conditions, under pressure, with lives depending on it? It was my job, Kaisha said simply. I had good training and good equipment, and I was part of a team that depended on each other. Jake, the range master, finally spoke up. Ma'am, I had no idea we had such a distinguished shooter at our range today. Is there anything we can do for you? Any special accommodations you need? Thank you, but I'm fine, Kaisha said. I just wanted to do some practice shooting. It helps me stay sharp and deal with the adjustment to civilian life. Morrison looked thoughtful. The adjustment can be difficult, he said. When I retired, I had trouble figuring out what to do with myself. That's part of why I come here. It helps me feel connected to my military experience. I understand, Kaisha said. It's been challenging. In the Army, I had a clear mission and a team that depended on me. Civilian life is different. Sometimes I come here just to remember what it felt like to have that focus and precision. The crowd was listening respectfully to their conversation. Many of them were learning about the difficulties that veterans face when transitioning back to civilian life. Morrison extended his hand to Kaisha. Sergeant Major Williams, it would be an honor to shake your hand. And if you ever want to shoot together again, I promise to treat you with the respect you deserve from the beginning. Kaisha shook his hand. Thank you, General. And please call me Kaisha. We're both civilians now. Only if you call me Richard, Morrison replied. I think we're past the formalities after what happened today. Dave and Carl also approached to apologize and pay their respects. They admitted that they had made the same wrong assumptions as Morrison and felt ashamed of their behavior. As the crowd began to disperse, several people approached Kaisha individually. Some thanked her for her service. Others asked respectful questions about her military experience. A few veterans shared their own stories and talked about the challenges of returning to civilian life. Morrison stayed until the end, helping Kaisha pack up her equipment. "I learned something important today," he said. "I thought my military experience made me an expert on everything related to shooting in the military. But I realized that there's always more to learn, and there are always people who know more than I do." "We all make mistakes," Kaisha replied. "The important thing is that we learn from them." "I also learned that I need to check my assumptions about people," Morrison continued. "I've probably made similar mistakes before without realizing it. Today was a wake-up call for me." As they walked toward the parking lot, Morrison asked, "What are your plans now that you're out of the service?" "I'm still figuring that out," Kaisha said. "I'm thinking about maybe teaching shooting or working in law enforcement. Something where I can use my skills to help people." "With your abilities and experience, you could probably write your own ticket anywhere," Morrison said. "Any law enforcement agency or security company would be lucky to have you." They reached Kaisha's car, and she loaded her rifle case into the back seat. "Thank you for the competition today, Richard. Despite how it started, I enjoyed it." Morrison laughed. "I'm not sure I enjoyed getting completely outshot, but I learned something valuable. And I met someone truly remarkable." He paused. "I hope you'll come back to the range again. Maybe next time I'll just ask you to teach me something instead of assuming I need to teach you," Kaisha smiled. "I'd like that. Everyone can always improve their shooting, no matter how experienced they are." As she drove away, Morrison stood in the parking lot thinking about what had happened. He had come to the range that morning feeling confident about his abilities and his knowledge. He was leaving with a new understanding of his own limitations and a deep respect for someone he had wrongly judged. The story of what happened at the shooting range that day spread quickly through social media and local news. It became a lesson about the dangers of making assumptions about people and the importance of treating everyone with respect. But for Morrison and Kaisha, it was the beginning of an unlikely friendship built on mutual respect and a shared love of precision shooting.